Welcome to Trail and Ultra Running Training. My name is Will Frantz. I'm a running coach and a strength coach, and the whole goal of this podcast is to help you train a little better so that you can have more fun out on the trails. Today, I'm going to talk about a few different things in regards to nutrition and how to use nutrition to kind of support your athletic goals. If you like this podcast, if you like this information, I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe. I think that's the thing that matters the most, which makes sense. It tells the robots that someone wants to hear this on repeat, which maybe might push it to other people. You could also leave a rating or review or anything, or just send a link to another human being. That would also be great. Anyway, let's talk about nutrition. I heard this phrase a few weeks ago, and it was, every athletic goal is also a nutritional goal, or something along those lines. And the idea stuck with me because it is so true. And it's not that just because you have an athletic goal or you have a training goal or whatever, you need to get super OCD with your nutrition. It's not what it means. Just like for most of us, to get a little better at running and improve our training, we don't need to get completely in the weeds on what our lactate levels are and be finger pricking every whatever. It's not necessary. But the point is, if we do want to make some changes, make some improvements to our training, to our whatever, there will be nutritional things that come along with that. Now, see this a lot, very obviously, in the fat loss space of fitness. There's this whole way too much conversation about being smaller and dieting, and you can probably hear it in the shift of my voice or see it in my face. I just find it tedious and tiring because I don't know. There's probably other things that we could target that would make you happier than losing 5 pounds. And if we pursue those things, we often tend to lose the 5 pounds anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But very clearly, if you want to lose body fat, we need to eat in a calorie deficit. That either means you get to move more or eat less or whatever. And it is just physics. Now, there's multiple ways to achieve that. There's multiple reasons why there might be problems with that, right? If you have a really reduced thyroid, then your output is going to be way lower than what you might expect it to be. So the numbers that you plug into whatever calorie app you're trying to use might be really fucking wrong. And that's okay, but we need to eat in a calorie deficit if we're trying to lose weight. Now, if we are trying to perform well athletically, we need to be somewhere near maintenance, or maybe even a slight surplus, depending on whether we're trying to put on muscle mass or not. And again, you don't need to plug in the numbers. We just need to have a basic idea of how we're looking, how we're feeling, how our clothes are fitting. If the scale doesn't send you into some kind of spiral, then step on that thing occasionally and see if it changes by drastic amounts week to week. And this is not to say that your weight shouldn't change. Your weight probably should go up and down throughout the year. It should go up and down throughout the week, throughout the day. Pick a time span. You're never static, right? Things are always going on in your body. But if we are trying to train for performance, then we should probably be pretty pinpointed on our weight and nutrition and making sure we're getting in enough food. Now, I see a lot, it has been a very nice shift lately to have this more food during training conversation. From when I was a kid and from the Oregon Project and from when they were weighing people in, and I realize that shit still happens, but I think it is happening, I know it's happening a lot less, and it is the fringe now rather than the peak effort to increase performance. We are now talking about basically how much food can a person put down in their training, in their long runs, in their big efforts. When we look at David Roach's most recent Leadville record, when he set it for 100, I think he he made a post about this, so just go look at his Instagram a couple weeks ago if you're interested. But it's something like 100, I want to say 120 grams of carbs an hour average over the entire time, anywhere for ranging from like 100 to 140, depending on where he was in the race and what he was doing. And that's insane. Like, I'm not sure that we fully understand how the human body can digest that, because the last I looked into it, which wasn't all that long ago, I don't think we thought we had enough intestinal transporters to intake that much carbohydrate, yet it's working, and it's working really well. And I think it might just be as simple as, if you're moving faster, you need more food, which feels like a stupid thing to say, because in some ways it's so obvious, but it's absolutely true. And when we look at some of these like nutritional calculators or fueling things, you'll see there's a fairly simple math equation to figure out how many calories you're going to burn on a run. It's like a calorie per kilogram of body weight per kilometer traveled. And for every vertical kilometer you do, it's 10 of like a normal kilometer, right? So we can basically figure out through math how many calories you're going to expend on whatever race. And it's pretty close. Like, it's probably not perfect, but it's definitely close enough. And the thing that gets tricky is we need to figure out how many of those are coming from carbohydrate, because all of us have enough fat to support whatever we need to do, unless you're maybe doing like an FKT on some, like on the Appalachian Trail or the Continental Divide or something that's going to take you a few weeks. Otherwise, that's the whole theory behind the fat adaptation thing. You have enough body fat to support you for a very long time. Now, for carbohydrates, if you even read something like Coop's book, he will recommend something between 30 and 40% of your total calorie burn to replace with carbohydrates, which is pretty reasonable, because that would put you like below your aerobic threshold, which is probably where a lot of really good athletes with incredibly good cardiac output are running ultras. If you have someone like Courtney Dauwalter, who grew up as a cross-country skier, and those people have an incredible VO2 max, she is probably spending most of these races, in spite of going so fast, just living in zone 2, because she has such a high cardiac output. And as a result, I think she intakes like 70 some grams or something, maybe even less of carbohydrate, which is far lower than we're starting to see other people push. But it's because she's working at such a low percentage of her total output. Whereas David Roche, like, pushed it into zone 3, into lactate producing space above aerobic threshold for quite a long time in Leadville. He spent a ton of time in this upper portion. So if you run the quick math on how many carbs he consumed and how many he was probably burning, we're probably working closer to like 50% of total output. And this means that he needed a lot more. We increase from whatever numbers we were thinking about in the past, and it's a lot higher than most of us think. And I think, one, that could feel like a chore, because it is. Let's be honest, trying to remember to fuel with that many carbohydrates per hour is exhausting. It probably requires alarms so that you don't shove 100 grams of carbs into your stomach all at one time. It probably requires you to it requires you to be on top of it. It's going to require you to intake probably every 15 minutes, maybe. And people just don't like doing that. We kind of get in a groove, right? So we need to make this part of the habit that is running. Like the bottle that's sitting on your chest, you just need to sip on it like a gerbil for the entirety of your run. And if you do that, then you're probably going to run better. The other things that tend to go along with this, that I don't think people in my position often talk about, is it's fucking expensive. Like, these gels and things, they're not cheap. And as someone where running is related to my profession, I don't use them, first. And two, they'd be a tax write-off, right? So they're a write-off for someone like David Roche, and he's also sponsored, so it's cheaper for him. For most people, it's fucking expensive. It would be expensive for me, even as a write-off. So instead, and I brought this stupid tub over here to show you, I use this, which is real dumb. It is like, and I'm not sponsoring this product. I'm not saying you need to use this. I'm just showing you how to maybe do this cheaper. It's called Carbogain, and it's just pure maltodextrin. Which isn't what's in a lot of our gels and whatever anyway. And you can intake at least 60 grams of that an hour. So I just blend that into water, put a little salt in, put a little lemon juice, and it kind of tastes like salty Gatorade. And it's really cheap. It's like 20 cents a serving, and a serving being 30 grams of carbohydrates. So it's like a fifth of what you'd pay for a goo or any of these gels, and it works just fine. You can also get powdered fructose, which I have some. You don't really need that unless you're pushing over 60 grams an hour. And in my current training, that's kind of where I am. I'm about 60 grams an hour. I'm going to start pushing more soon, which is when we'll start tossing in a little more of the fructose. But you can do this for not that much money. It just takes a little bit of know-how. There's another gel that I just saw that's called like Carbs Fuel. All it is, it's like 5 ingredients or something, and it's very simple and should digest very well. A couple of my athletes with sensitive stomachs have been trying it, and it's been working very well. Again, I'm not sponsored by any of these people. I don't care if you try it. There's just a lot of options if you want to start increasing your fuel, which if you care about your performance, you probably should. Because again, every athletic goal is a nutritional goal. Now that was fueling. This also applies to the rest of our life, though. If we are expending, as an athlete, 3,000 plus calories a day, which is not that low, all things considered for how much people in the trail and ultra running community run and train and move and etc. If you don't work like an incredibly sedentary desk job and like stay active, right? So if we do that, then we probably need to eat breakfast. We probably need to eat lunch. You probably need to fuel your, pardon me, you probably need to fuel your training. You probably need to have a reasonable dinner. We need to have some fiber. I'm starting to toss chia seeds in my water. I saw this on the internet, and it was some fat loss hack. I think that's really stupid. It's not going to do anything from a fat loss perspective, really. But it is good for you, and I don't mind a little bit of the crunchiness. So I've been starting to do that to increase my soluble fiber, because we all have places where we could probably improve our nutrition. I tend to hit the protein targets pretty well. I really struggle with the fiber. Most people struggle with both. But if we can increase our fiber intake, make sure we're consuming enough protein so that your muscles can recover well, make sure that we're eating enough carbohydrates on our runs to actually fuel so that our recovery starts in the run instead of 12 hours after the run when you decide it's finally time to eat. Any of these things will help. If you're feeling more fatigued, if your muscles hurt, if we're struggling with tendon injuries, if your sleep is bad, if whatever, maybe we need to eat more in order to support our training. And I realize that there is a complicated thing here because, like me, many people in this space, whatever this space would be, I was going to say running, but it's really all of fitness. I see this shit across the board when it comes to fitness. But like me, we might have a complicated past with our weight. And we might have gotten into endurance stuff because you didn't like how you looked or you wanted to lose some body fat or whatever. And maybe we still have a complicated relationship with the scale, or when you look in the mirror, you only see particular parts of yourself that if you point them out to someone else, they say, I literally have never noticed that on you, right? This is a lot of my conversations with clients. And it is just as in I give them my perspective on myself and they feel very surprised. Anyway, it's not easy, but I will tell you that if you fuel for the performance you want to see, most of the other shit will usually fall in line. Or, and this is also important, you should probably ask yourself if there's any way that you are ever going to be happy about it. Or if there's any way that you're going to have these two things at the same time. And for me, someone who has been very lean, that is probably what my brain wants me to look like. And when I'm like that, I'm hurt all the time and I can't perform. And I would rather run really far, lift super heavy, and just have some food freedom than look like that. Those two things don't exist at the same time for me without a level of OCD that would make me really mentally unhealthy. And I think we need to occasionally have this conversation and see what your actual priorities are, what your actual goals are. Do you care more about running well? Do you care more about your performance? Do we care about setting a good example for those around us to not have like a fucked up relationship with food? And I care about those things so much more, which is why when I'm done here, I'm going to go eat some food and make sure that I have all of my bottles packed so that I can hit my hard midday workout session as hard as I deserve to hit it. And if you are on the other end of that, where you care more about the weight loss space and maybe you're like type 2 diabetic and have 100 pounds to lose, and this is a very different conversation, but we should realize where we are and what the priorities are at the moment, and then make some nutritional choices that actually support our training goals. Because again, every training goal comes with a nutritional goal. And again, and it doesn't mean it needs to be the most intricate OCD, track every gram of food that goes into your body. I haven't done that in a long time, partially because I spent some time doing that, so I have some idea. But you don't need to do that. We just need to fuel well. And if we just make sure that we're eating mostly, and very key on mostly, whole foods, because I just showed you a giant tub of very highly processed carbohydrates that I'm going to use to support a run later. But we're eating mostly whole foods and getting in a good intake and eating a few times a day and making sure that we're not going into fatigue and all of these things that we know we should be doing. And if you don't, message me. I'm happy to give you some biometric, like some markers of what you're looking for. But all of these things that most of us like deep down know what we should be doing and just aren't. If we do those things, we're going to see a massive increase in performance. And if we accept the fact that like this little ring of fat around my like lower abdomen that I just like pointed out on video that nobody ever seems to realize except for me is probably superfluous, then maybe I just run harder up mountains, which is what I actually want to do anyway. So let's move on and eat well and run our hearts out, because I guess that's what we're all here for. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my ramblings. There's probably going to be a few more of these style. I both had a couple people join the Mountain Goat team, in addition to crewing a couple people over the next month for I Am Tough and Wasatch 100. So I will say I'm very glad I got the strength series done before all of that, because I want to keep up a regular cadence on the podcast, but they're definitely going to be a little more off the cuff conversations that are representative of the weekly talks I have with clients from both the gym and in the running space. I hope you have a great rest of your day and go have some fun on the trails. Thank you again for listening to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Just a reminder, nothing you hear on this podcast is medical advice, and you should always speak with a medical professional before making changes to your training or your nutrition. If you enjoyed the podcast or found it helpful, please leave a rating or review. It tells the algorithm robots that people like it, and that means more people will hear it. Or even better, just share it with someone who you think would benefit. If you prefer a video version, head to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Group on Facebook, or check out the Mountain Goat Endurance Coaching YouTube channel. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great next run.